press record and we'll get going with it. Hey, Danielle, what's up?
Hi, Leanne. How's it going?
I'm so good. I'm so happy we're chatting again.
Me too.
It's hard to believe it was just a couple of months ago that we were chatting in real life, but it feels like 5 years.
I think because a lot has happened in both of our lives.
It's insane how fast life moves. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I like to ask all of our guests when we're chatting about topics like this, what does self-acceptance mean to you?
So that's a pretty loaded one because it can mean so many different things for every single person, obviously, because we are all so different. But really, when it comes down to the bare bones of acceptance, what we really want is a feeling of love and general well-being towards every part of not only our body, but then our life. That's typically what because when we're talking, we're nutritionists talking about bodies and health, we also want to talk about environment as well. So self-acceptance is that general feeling of just happiness to me.
I love it. And okay, so let's rewind, say like 10 years and think back to December 30th, 31st of 10 years ago. What was going through your brain as the new year approached?
You know, I think I really did used to get caught up in what everybody else was doing in terms of like commercialization of, you know, that whole like, let's start a resolution and let's do something different. And, you know, my family was raised Catholic. And so Lent was always that big thing too, you know, where it was like, oh, we're going to give up this thing or we're going to do this new thing. And so I would kind of try and do something, but it wouldn't last. You know, it would be like, all right, I'm gonna eat healthy finally, or I'm gonna exercise, or I'm gonna, you know, try and you know, get this whatever this body is that everybody's talking about. And it definitely messes with you because you're just coming off of a high. I was spending time with family, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, you suck. Your life sucks. Everything about you is terrible, you know? And so it's an interesting way to start the year for sure.
I had never even thought about that. You're coming on this high of like all the festivities and like your heart is all warm from all the family stuff. And then there's like this heaviness of like, oh gosh, January 1st. And I suck as a human being.
Yes.
Like, there's nothing like it. So then, like myself, I would last until the 13th, the 14th, maybe the 23rd. And then that quote unquote failure would come in and I'd go off plan or I'd stop doing the things that I promised myself I would really do. And then there was like this heaviness and this guilt and shame around the fact that I wouldn't amount to anything. And then I'd give up all aspirations for a long time and get in this hole. Did you experience something similar?
Yeah, it was like cycles almost. So I would do that. And then all of a sudden they were advertising for bikini season, you know, and then it would be like, oh, it's May, let's work hard and, you know, do all these crazy things and restrict and, you know, and then you would do it all over again right before the holidays. You know, it's like, oh, it's back to school and now we got to look good for everybody for the holidays. And so it was just these random cycles of just feeling like, you know, emotionally like garbage the whole year.
Yeah. How did you get off the roller coaster? Like, do you remember this aha moment? I don't think I've ever asked you that, where it was like, wait a minute. I definitely had an aha moment, but did you have one?
I did. I definitely did. It was when I realized that, because it was right about the time I was healing my gut and I started, you know, going gluten-free and that type of stuff and really changing my habits. And I realized, oh, this is a lifestyle. Like, this is what I do every day. And not the restricting and not the I hate myself, but like I'm going to nourish my body every day and I'm going to show up and take care of myself. And so it was a very profound moment. And then I stopped relating with all of that marketing that was going on and just turned it into white noise, essentially.
A lot of people think that aspirations and goals can't coexist with self-acceptance. And how do you feel about that?
Well, as a clinical nutritionist, I do have to disagree. I just think that our goals should never be something that make us feel bad about ourselves. So, for me specifically, I always look at the tests. So the goal is going to be, are we going to come off of our medication? Are we going to reduce our blood pressure, our cholesterol? Are we going to get our hormones in balance? And those are positive goals. And so it's, really what I like to do is have the emotional component of self-love, and then also having these really beneficial, positive goals of reaching towards finding that self that's going to make us feel good every day.
Mm-hmm. And so you kind of mentioned, like, what can we do instead? Like getting off medication. How do we maintain a healthy relationship with that? Because I guess where I'm getting at is a woman can decide, I just want to feel better. Like maybe it's brain fog. This year I would really like to just not have brain fog. And I mean, we'll unpack the whole this year thing maybe after this, but I really just want to live without brain fog, and here are a couple things that I want to do. But then she's flipping through a magazine 2 months later. She's like totally hitting her goal of not having brain fog, and a magazine tells her that she's not good enough because she's a size, I don't know, insert a number here, 12. How do we constantly deal with the beratement of that media telling us that we're not good enough?
It's one of those situations that it is an exercise in itself. So we don't buy those magazines anymore. We don't watch the shows that make us feel bad about ourselves. We don't follow the people on social media that make us question our life or make us feel, crappy about what it is we're doing. We really almost have to become Luddites in a way, where we go back to an antiquated version of society, which I very much like. And, we find community with people and humans and have human conversations and find that vulnerability piece, and really just try and shut down that mass marketing of, that has been set in place for a very long time. I mean, clearly it's not something we can outrun, but it is something that, I always tell people, you vote with your dollar. The less magazines you buy, the magazine industry fails. The less, diet stuff you buy, the diet industry fails. And so really just becoming your own sort of advocate and pioneer to just say, no, I don't accept those things in my life because I know I'm amazing and I'm going to continue to pursue that.
Yeah, something I've really been focusing on, especially lately, is supporting small businesses with my dollar. So instead of, getting earrings at Target, finding a really cool jewelry maker that makes earrings that's local and then getting those. And yeah, they could be more expensive, and, it's hard-earned cash that I'm giving out, but it's just somebody else that can then live their dream and do the things that they want to do with their lives. And it just feels so much better having just one pair of earrings that cost $55 as opposed to 10 from Target. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes.
And so we chatted a little bit about, like, this year I'm going to get off my medication. And I think that there's a lot of stress around, okay, 2019 is here. I'm going to be a better human. I'm going to do this thing, even if it's coming from a space of self-acceptance. There's a lot of stress that comes with this time next year, I'm going to be better. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have to understand that time goals are finite, right? They're not something that actually are continuous, because there's no aspect of actually finishing. And so we have to understand that we have to really deconstruct what it actually is, like, completely, because people think goal has specific end date. When I achieve such end date, I will achieve ultimate happiness. And that's not reality, even though we've been taught that that's the way that it is. But the reality is that there is no time. There is no this time next year. It's, how do I want to feel right now? And what am I doing to achieve that? And, and then it is ongoing, because bodies continuously change. They say, what is it that our taste buds change every 7 years. Our microbiome is going through continual, 24-hour processes. We have to understand that, this beautiful biological, body that we live in is always growing and always changing. So those goals are going to change as well. And so having that this time next year is just complete bull honky, if you ask me. Yeah,
and so much can change in a year. Like, I mean, just think about how many things have changed since we last chatted. I don't even know what that was. Like, it was like July?
I think it was a beautiful day in July that we will always remember, having coffee and not having anything to do that day.
Yeah. It was great. Like, I actually had free time on a book tour to like hang out with a friend. That's nuts. And I love the question, how do I want to feel right now? That's something that I've really, I am super guilty of, and guilt isn't the right word. I'm very good at designing a life in my brain and then jumping headfirst into that life and then being like, well, why don't I have all the things? And I've built this thing up, like, why don't I have it right now? And something I've really tried lately is, how do I want to feel right now? Like, what is that feeling that I want to feel? And what can I do right now to capture that feeling? Whether it's like stepping outside into the sun or going for a swim. I'm currently in this beautiful house, if you're watching the video, with Keto Unlimited members, and it has a pool in the back. So I've been like just jumping in there whenever I just need to like de-stress. I think that's really important, of like living in the moment. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's truly what I try and cultivate with people, is that aspect of mindfulness. Really just come back into your body and think, what am I doing in this moment? And how do I want to proceed into the next moment? Because if we jump headfirst into this life or this idea that's completely outside of us, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how we're going to get there or what it's going to feel like. And then we may be disappointed, because then we have this thing built up inside of our head that it's going to be this idea of whatever perfect is, but perfect doesn't actually exist. And then it creates anxiety and tension. And then that's when deprivation comes in. And then that's when we have that sort of like that rebellious behavior against it. And so if we just really just live from moment to moment, and there are profound changes and healing that can happen with that as well. So.
Yeah. Deprivation is a big thing. Deprivation, restriction. I mean, my experience with an eating disorder was all based on the deprivation restriction cycle and then I'd feel guilt and shame, and it would just repeat and repeat and repeat. Can we chat a little bit about your experience with deprivation and how people get into that space, or what the sources are?
Absolutely. And I think all of us have experienced deprivation in one way or another, if we've had disordered eating or just existing in general. When society tells us that we should be this one way, which I hate the word should, I think it's so ridiculous. I tell everyone, stop shoulding on yourself.
I like that.
But society tells us that we should be this one way specifically. And we really just have to try and, I just lost my train of thought there.
That's fine. Hey, Sorry. We'll just edit it out.
Can you say the question again?
Yeah, totally.
I don't know what I was going on there.
You know what? You're like the seventh guest this recording period that I ask a question and they get really excited and they're like, wait, what were we talking about? You're fine. You're totally fine.
I don't know what happened. I was
I always keep a notebook beside me, and when people ask me a question, I write it down really quickly before I answer it, so I can constantly look. It's the only way to get through an interview.
Oh my God, I'll do that from now on.
Totally cool.
Okay.
So let's chat a little bit more about deprivation and the role that it has for all of us. Like, what's going on there? What are the feelings? And what are the sources that are causing that deprivation?
Absolutely. So deprivation is something that we all deal with in so many different levels. And that idea of, that I should be this one way, or I'm supposed to be this one way, that is the catalyst for what deprivation. And because the reality is there is no should, there is no ideal, there is no element of perfection. There's just a matter of how you want to feel, but we don't understand that aspect. So we live in this world where we think we're supposed to be this one specific way, and it doesn't fit. It's not clicking. And then we realize, oh my gosh, well then there's something wrong with me and I'm a failure, or I suck at life, or, there's all this fear and anxiety that sets in. And so we start to remove things out of our life that at one point maybe created happiness for us, or is an integral part of our day. And so we say, no, I must take this thing out because then I must be this one way. And so then, of course, that we're just riddled with this feeling of depravity. And then that, of course, we know deprivation breeds entitlement. And so then we again of, no, well, I can do this and I can do that. And then we go to an extreme. So then we overcompensate. And then that's where more, controlled restriction comes in, or we get binge eating disorder, or, we go off on a bender and do all of these different things because we're so out of balance, because the balance we knew before was being taken away from us because of an outside ideal. And then it's just chaos. And unfortunately, that is the state of most of the people in our country today, unfortunately, when it comes to food and their relationship with their bodies.
Yeah, we have so much work to do in the space. And I sometimes forget that not everyone talks like this, and not everyone listens to podcasts like this. And then I just have regular conversations. Like we went to a fundraiser a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know, the topic of food came up, and I don't love talking about my work, like outside of my work, because it's like bash my head against a wall. And somebody said something and I was like, wait, humans still think this? Like, this is haven't we been through this? I'm like, oh yeah, not everyone is at this stage. And that's why it's so important, even for listeners who have full-time jobs or, have nothing to do with health and wellness, to share this message with their children and their friends and anyone who's interested. I've had many girlfriends be like, so tell me about this self-acceptance stuff. And I'm like, heck yeah. Let's do it. How much time do you have?
I'm going to change your life.
Yeah. Get a notepad. And so I know that there is this belief around New Year's, and I think we really need to focus on it, because many of the women listening, if you're still listening and you don't think we're just talking a bunch of baloney, about the fact that if I lose X pounds or I look X way, my life will be better. I'll be happier. I know that that's something that I believed for a long time. And I would say I still have moments where I think that. Like, I would say 5 to 10% of my life still has that story. How do we, it's a loaded question, but how do we take the first step to understanding that maybe that's not true?
I think we have to find a likeness. We have to find a likeness in either someone else or something that makes us feel that. Because the first step, I can't just say, oh, just love yourself. Because that could take a whole journey for people, multiple books or a retreat or something that's completely life-changing for them to come to this place of acceptance. But the first step, I would say, is find a likeness to someone or something that makes you feel really good about yourself, that makes you feel a place of non-judgment, that makes you feel accepted, that makes you feel beautiful. And hold on to that, and then see where it takes you and kind of go on that journey. Because we're all victim to it for sure. I wrote the book on body love, and it creeps in sometimes. And then I'm like, whoa, let's unpack this. Where did this come from? And it usually is something someone else said. So that shame conversation is always going to be perpetual. Someone's always going to say something mean. Someone's always going to say something about your body to you. Like, sometimes it's not even behind your back. Sometimes it is straight up to your face. And you may not even notice it because you're so used to it. But that's how it creeps back in. And so what we have to do is we have to go back to that safe place and find that beautiful feeling of love and acceptance again.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point. And for anyone listening that might have an experience with an eating disorder, something happened to me recently, and it took me a couple of days to process it. I relapsed with my eating disorder about a week ago, and totally blows. And I've done so much work to get to this point. And what triggered me was somebody said, "You're a thin white woman." And that just brought up so much for me. Like when people comment on my body in a way that I don't believe, it was challenging for me to process that at that moment. And it made me relapse. And I've been solid for almost 2 years, fighting the good fight. And it just took that one comment that wasn't even directed at me in a harsh way. It was just somebody saying something, and I understand that now. But in that moment, somebody commenting on my body was enough for me to be like, to just totally forget all the things and go back in time. And I think it's super dangerous when we comment on, would you agree that when we comment on other people's bodies, you don't necessarily know how it's going to be taken? Like, a lot of people be like, oh my gosh, Leanne, boo-hoo, somebody called you thin. But for somebody who struggled with an eating disorder, being told that they're thin brings on a whole bunch of stuff that is challenging to unpack. Would you agree?
Oh, I completely wholeheartedly agree, because I just recently spent a weekend with family, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, Leanne.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
It's really tough. I just spent a weekend with family, and my body has changed a lot since the last time people saw me. And, my cousin had even said, no, you were too skinny before. But then that makes me hate my former self. And we can't dislike body before, now, or future. We have to like our body as a whole and come to a place of healing. And so it's disruptive to my healing, because then it's like, oh my gosh, well, what if my body changes again? I don't want my body to change again. And then the fear creeps in. And so then it stops me from, I don't know, what if I wanted to go run a marathon, but then it made my body, but then I'm just going to be thinking about my body the whole time instead of, doing something awesome. Like, I've never run a marathon before. What if that was something I wanted to accomplish? And so this is the problem, is that we can come to a place of healing, but those comments they're always going to hit us. And so just really at least learning to sit with it and, understand where we need to go from there. And I completely can relate. And I'm sorry that happened.
It's all a lesson. It's just, how it is, you work so feverishly in understanding yourself. And I think for me, it's, I'm at the very edge of submitting a manuscript, and I'm not taking care of myself. And I didn't have, like you do your practices and you work up to things and you have everything kind of balanced out, and you let your guard down because you're exhausted. And I haven't been doing enough self-care. And then that came at me, and I didn't even I wasn't self-conscious enough to realize that it bothered me that much in the moment. And I think that just goes to show of like, you being conscious of yourself, your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions is so important with any of this sort of work, because when you're not checking in with yourself, then there's no space that you've created. And it is what it is. And, it's frustrating, because it just is. It's just really frustrating. But to even be able to talk about it 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to, oh my God, say this on a podcast. And when I know like at least 100,000 people are going to hear that, it's terrifying, but it's also, I think it's so important to understand, however far we get in this process of accepting our body and giving a middle finger to the new year and everything that it stands for, we can still have comments like you experienced back home, and know that it'll be fine. And there's space that we created, and we learn from that process. And in the case of teachers like us, it's like, okay, how can we use that to teach in our experience, even though it's really crappy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I definitely wanted to mention the whole, I think we should just have a policy, and I've really been practicing this, of not commenting on people's bodies at all.
Not at all. Not even close. Not one iota. Not a you look great. More, how about you look happy? So proud of your accomplishments. That thing you did last week, that was badass. Like, no more body stuff.
Yeah. And even with children, you know, like my cousin has a daughter who's 5 years old and she loves wearing princess dresses. Like, I don't know. She's obsessed with princess dresses. And every time I see her on the video, I very much consciously try not to say, you look so pretty, or because I think it just sets that stage of you are a body and it looks great at a certain, you know, how it look. You never know how that stuff is going to translate as that little being becomes a woman.
Yes. And they absorb everything you say. And they want to do exactly what you're doing. So,
yep. And this is reason number 8,472 why I am not responsible enough to have a child.
I second that for myself.
Like, oh my gosh. I screw up my dogs. So.
What is it? Justin Baldoni. I am just like so obsessed with him. He's the one that's on Jane the Virgin, and he's always talking about his daughter. And he recently has been like taking her, to school in the morning. And he's like, I can't even drink coffee because then she wants to drink coffee and then realizes we become these like fully functioning adults after we've had a cup of coffee. And then I'm on my phone all the time. And he's like, I got to make sure I'm not on my phone. And I was like, oh my God, just even those two thoughts of me. So I am continuously approving that I am not going to have children.
Oh my gosh. I mean, parents have such a beautiful job, and like kudos to anyone who is a parent, because oh my goodness, it is crazy. Okay. What do you think is missing in the keto space for women right now? Like what do you wish there was more of?
So I guess I would say from afar, it doesn't look like there needs to be any different, but up close, because I went on the low carb cruise. I was a speaker in the spring, and to observe the behaviors, it was very disordered and it was very triggering for me. And I had to like continuously say it was okay that I was like eating what I was eating because I was on vacation. And people were like literally like up in my face, questioning my food, questioning my drinks. Like it was just like, it was too much. I will never do that again. I don't think I'll ever do this with people that are in that space again, because that is not the headspace I was in. So from afar, I feel like keto's great. It's doing what it needs. I feel like you are doing the best work in keto because you bring in like the body love and the acceptance and everything like that. And you teach people how to understand food and how it works in their body. And so they're not continuously like weighing and measuring every macro. So I would say if people could be following more the style of keto that you're doing, it would be probably more beneficial on a mass scale. But for the rest of the ketogenic sphere, if you're not using it for a severe therapeutic style of healing, then please stop making it a clinical style. Stop making a clinical diet, because you literally have like, I don't know, epilepsy, Parkinson's, cancer, any sort of neurodegenerative disorder, any sort of inflammatory disease that needs a therapeutic style of ketogenics, then please stop weighing and measuring your food, stop checking that you're in ketosis all of the time, and just like live in your body. The fact that you're eating to nourish, so obsessed with your food. So that's what I mean, as a clinical nutritionist and someone that actually works with people and the population, that only does more harm if we're bringing that clinical aspect into the Gen Pop, because it doesn't have a space there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And thanks for the vote of confidence. That means a lot coming from you. So it's like highlight of my day. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, even going to things like KetoCon can be triggering for me, just because, especially when I first started keto and I was eating traditional keto. And then in 2014, when I started going to my first keto conferences, and there's that girl over there that says she's keto, but she's eating a sweet potato. And it's like having to justify your food choices. It's too much. It's totally too much. So I just choose not to eat like in front of people. Bring it to my room. I
will eat my sweet potatoes in peace.
Yes. Oh, that's too great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Danielle. I really appreciate it. You're always such a blast to chat with.
I'm just grateful to you. I think you're such an amazing human, and everything you're doing in the world is so beneficial. And I feel very blessed to call you my friend.
Oh, my heart. Thank you so much. And where can people find you?
You can find me at DanielleDellaValle.com or on Instagram at DanielleDellaValleNTP. And if you subscribe, you will see that I am launching a brand new 12-week online course.
When does that launch?
That'll launch in February, the first week of February. And it's a 12 weeks to happy weight. So it's going to be super exciting.
I am so excited for this. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. I finally, 2 years, it's been published in January. So yeah, I figured I had to do something.
Well, good luck creating it and have fun with that process. And we'll include all the show notes and links and things that you just shared over at healthfulpursuit.com/podcast/E118, including a link to your website and the program if you have it live by the time the show goes live, and your book and all the things.
Yay.
Well, thanks so much for coming on again.
Thank you for having me.